Welcome to Wild Basin Wilderness Preserve. This preserve protects 227 acres of beautiful Texas hill country habitat right here in Austin. It's part of the much larger Balcones Canyonlands Preserve, which covers about 50 square miles. Many rare and vulnerable species of animals and birds live here. That's why we protect the land. This is a great place to enjoy being outside and learn about the natural world. So, are you ready to go exploring? Oh, hi! Didn't see you there. You know, if you're walking on the trails at Wild Basin and you look really closely, you might see an ant. Or a few ants. Or a whole lot of ants!
We can see them interacting with things like crumbs of food, pebbles, leaves, or a magnifying glass. Wait, that last one was mine. But we can still see them interacting with their environment.
Which brings us to our topic for today, biodiversity and ecosystems. For that, Professor Kim O'Keefe is here to help us. Take it away, Kim.
Yeah, Wild Basin is a natural ecosystem that's near Austin, and an ecosystem is a natural area that has a lot of different living organisms that live together, and it's those living organisms and the interactions of those organisms with their natural environment. So all the living and then the non-living things that are together in a certain area. So at Wild Basin, that would be all the plants that live at Wild Basin, so all the trees and all the wildflowers and all the grasses, and then all of the insects, for example, like monarch butterflies, all of the birds that live at Wild Basin, the golden-cheeked warbler, all of the woodpeckers and chickadees, and all the, there's lots of fish that live in Bee Creek at Wild Basin. So you can think about an ecosystem of the fish interacting with the non-living Bee Creek, the water in Bee Creek. You can think about the frogs that live near in wetter environments. You can think about like the Texas garter snake and how that might interact with its physical environment. So really an ecosystem is basically all of those living things that are together in a physical environment.
A plant like this yucca is really well adapted or well suited for living in these dry upland areas. So on top of the hilly areas where it's a lot sunnier a lot of the times, and it's usually warmer because it's more exposed and sunnier. The soil here is also more rocky, and there's not as much of it, so it's not as deep, so it's a lot drier. And so these types of plants are really well suited for growing in these sunny, dry conditions that are on the tops of hills at Wild Basin.
So within an ecosystem, there are lots of different living organisms that live together. And if you think about one type of living organism, like say a single species, say for example, the golden-cheeked warbler is a species at Wild Basin. There are lots of individuals of that type of species. So there are lots of individual warblers that are at Wild Basin, and all those individuals that live together and interact together are called a population. And then multiple different populations, so say multiple different types of birds, like warblers, and then chickadees, and then woodpeckers, all of those different populations that are interacting together form a community. So you can say that we have a large community of different bird species at Wild Basin. And this applies to all kinds of organisms at Wild Basin, so not just birds. So you can think about even plants at Wild Basin. So you can look at different tree species and individual trees that are growing together that form a population of trees. And then you can think about the different types of tree species that are at Wild Basin, and those different populations of different tree species together form a community of trees. And so Wild Basin has many different communities of different types of organisms, of trees, of birds, of insects, of fish, of snakes. And because we have so many of these different communities, we'd say that Wild Basin is incredibly diverse, and we'd say that it has high biodiversity. So it has a very large variety of different types of organisms that are living together in the same ecosystem. And this is really important because having this high biodiversity helps the ecosystem thrive. So having more trees at Wild Basin, more different types of trees, helps support, say, a larger variety of insects that are at Wild Basin, or a larger variety of birds. So for example, take the ash juniper tree at Wild Basin. Ash juniper trees have berries, which support robins that might feed on the berries, but they also support the golden cheek warbler that uses its bark to build nests. So having this one type of tree species supports multiple other birds in the entire ecosystem. And then the more types of trees that you have, the more types of plants, the more other organisms that can be supported.
So if you look real closely at the plant life that's along the trails at Wild Basin, you'll see that there's a lot of diversity here. So like this is a yucca, which is a type of plant, but it's growing right next to an ash juniper, which is this tree over here. And they're growing next to this other type of shrub, another type of tree, a woody plant. But then there's also these grasses that are growing right next to it all.
Yeah, so sustainability is the idea that we want to sustain ecosystems and keep them the way they are right now. So even though we're humans and we're interacting with ecosystems, we want to live in a way that protects them and that they don't diminish in the future. And so you can think about this in terms of small things that you can do in your own life. So for example, ecosystems need water, right? And so if ecosystems need water, but humans also need water, we shouldn't use too much water. So if you're, say, brushing your teeth, it's important to turn the water off while you're brushing your teeth to save water. So if we try and limit that, then we can try and protect ecosystems like Wild Basin so that they continue to exist in the future for future generations.